Trump revealed that the new tariffs on China are another 100% in excess of the tariffs that are already in effect. There's now another 100% on top of that because gold is now over 4,000. In fact, it hit a new all-time record high on Wednesday of 4,056-ish, I think is what I recall. Silver actually got above $51 yesterday and then touched $51 again today. Now, it had resistance up at that level. And in fact, yesterday, when silver gapped up to $51 here in New York, or New York hours, there was a big sell-off. Silver dropped back down below 49 after trading above 51. So there was a lot of people that sold the new high.
Peter Schiff discusses how Trump's announcement of an additional 100% tariff on China coincided with gold and silver reaching record highs, with gold surpassing $4,000 and silver briefly trading above $51. Despite these gains, silver experienced a sharp pullback, dropping below $49 after the initial surge, reflecting investor caution and nervous profit-taking. Silver and gold stocks also reacted nervously, with many silver stocks falling 5 to 8%, signaling how quickly investors exit at the first signs of a potential market top or correction. Schiff emphasizes that, despite these sell-offs, the weekly closes for both metals were historic, with silver closing above $50 and gold above $4,000 for the first time. Gold and silver stocks, however, lagged, partly due to broader market weakness, including one of the Dow's worst trading days of the year, down nearly 880 points. Other major indices also fell sharply. The S&P down 2.7%, Russell 2000 down 3%, and Nasdaq down 3.5%, even as Nasdaq briefly hit a record intraday high. He points out that the Nasdaq experienced an outside reversal, closing below the previous day's lows and signaling potential larger declines ahead. According to Schiff, the escalation of trade tensions with China was the primary catalyst for this market turmoil, reinforcing the perception of uncertainty and risk across both equities and precious metals markets.
Now, there was a lot of concern the prior day that silver would not get above 50 because the silver stocks actually were weak on Wednesday because I think traders were expecting a decline. And then when we got the huge gap up on Thursday, all those silver and gold stocks gapped way up. But then we got the sell-off from the higher level, and gold and silver stocks had one of their worst days of the year, maybe of the bull market. Silver stocks in particular, on a day that silver traded above 51 for the first time and closed above 49. It was still a strong positive close, just not above 50. You had a lot of silver stocks down, 5 to 8%. So they got clobbered. And again, that just shows you how nervous investors are and how quickly they run for the exits on any sign that, oh no, maybe there's a top, maybe there's going to be a correction. So far, nothing indicates to me that that is the case, especially considering the fact that silver recovered and closed really, I think, above $50 on the week. This is the highest daily close ever for silver. It's the highest weekly close ever for silver. I think the same for gold. This is the highest gold has ever closed a week. In fact, it's never closed above 4,000. And, now it's closed a week above 4,000, not just the day. And the gold stocks were actually down a bit, most of them. The GDX was down about 2.5% on the week, although the GDXJ managed to eke out a small gain on the week. But all of this was the result of the big drop that we had on Thursday. Now, you would have thought that maybe the gold and silver stocks would have recovered some of that drop today, but I think the overall carnage in the stock market prevented that from happening. The Dow had one of its worst days of the year, down about 880 points or so, 878 points. That was almost a 2% decline on the day. The Dow down 2.5% now on the week. The S&P, though, was down 2.7% today. Russell 2000 down 3%. Big down. The Nasdaq was down about 3.5% on the day, 2.5% on the week. In fact, the Nasdaq hit a new all-time record high today on the same day that it was down 3.5%. That is an outside reversal day. The Nasdaq took out yesterday's high and then not only took out yesterday's low, but closed below yesterday's low. And in fact, it did the same thing on a weekly chart. The Nasdaq took out the high from the prior week and then closed below the low from the prior week. So that is a bad sign for the Nasdaq that a bigger decline is coming. The catalyst for this decline was Trump getting tough on China.
Peter Schiff explains how Donald Trump's new announcement of an additional 100% tariff on China, along with export controls on U.S. tech products like NVIDIA chips, shook global markets. Schiff describes how the news came out shortly after the U.S. stock market closed, triggering a further sell-off in both equities and cryptocurrencies. He highlights that Bitcoin suffered the most, falling around 5% on the week, while gold rose 3% and silver 4.4%, reinforcing his long-standing argument that Bitcoin is not digital gold. According to Schiff, Bitcoin behaves like a risk asset, moving in the same direction as the Nasdaq rather than acting as a safe haven during uncertainty. At the time of recording, Bitcoin had dropped to around $113,000, briefly touching $109,000, marking a 25 to 26% decline since its peak in gold terms. Schiff concludes that Bitcoin is in a clear bear market when priced in gold, and he expects further downside ahead for both Bitcoin and tech-heavy indices like the Nasdaq. He warns that the current overvaluation in tech stocks could easily lead to a deeper correction or full-blown bear market. Schiff adds that, based on past behavior, Trump might attempt to calm the markets with new statements or actions if the sell-off intensifies by early next week.
Earlier in the day, he posted on Truth Social that he was going to impose some serious tariffs on China in addition to the tariffs we already have. I guess he was preparing to get medieval on China, but we didn't even know the extent until after the close. And probably, I don't know, about a half hour or so after the U.S. stock market closed, Trump revealed that the new tariffs on China are another 100% in excess of the tariffs that are already in effect. There's now another 100% on top of that. And in addition, there's going to be export controls on what the U.S. exports to China, most likely, in computer-related stuff like NVIDIA stuff and all that we don't want the Chinese to have, those GPUs. So as a result, we got additional sell-off in the stock market after the close. But the biggest decline came in Bitcoin, which was already down. I mean, Bitcoin was down pretty big when the U.S. stock market closed. In fact, Bitcoin was down 5% on the week. Now, in contrast to gold being up 3% and silver being up 4.4% on the week. So again, this should put another nail in the theory that Bitcoin is digital gold. I mean, it's not even digital silver. It's got nothing to do with a precious metal. Bitcoin did not rally today. Gold and silver went up. Bitcoin went down. It went down just like the Nasdaq, only it went down more than the Nasdaq. So it is a risk asset. It is not a safe haven asset. It has got nothing to do with gold. But now Bitcoin is selling off even more. As I am recording this update, Bitcoin is around 113,000. Just before I started recording, Bitcoin was below 110,000. It was about 109,000 and change. When Bitcoin was down at 110,000, it was down 26% since it peaked in terms of gold in August. And based on where it is right now, it's maybe off not quite 25%. But Bitcoin is decidedly in a bear market priced in gold. And so I think that we have a lot more downside coming in Bitcoin and the Nasdaq. I mean, I don't know how how far the Nasdaq's going to fall, if it's just going to be a correction or if it's going to be a bear market, we'll see. Clearly, there's been a lot of enthusiasm for tech stocks, and the valuations are at nosebleed territory. So anything could justify this. But of course, we know from the past with Taco, Trump, maybe he'll come out on Monday morning or Sunday night if it looks like the stock market is really selling off.
Peter Schiff explains that Trump announced an additional 100% tariff on China along with export controls on tech products, causing a sharp sell-off in stocks and Bitcoin, while gold and silver rose. Bitcoin fell about 5% on the week, highlighting that it behaves as a risk asset, not a safe haven like gold or silver. At recording, Bitcoin was around $113,000, down roughly 25 to 26% in gold terms since its August peak. Schiff warns that further declines are likely for both Bitcoin and tech stocks, given overvalued valuations, while Trump may attempt market interventions if the sell-off worsens.